Hello, this is Christina Barn. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barn. Today we're going to be talking about Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is obviously on the Supreme Court, but she's letting her activism, she's coming out the gate really, really strong, talking about the 14th Amendment. She believes that it wasn't, she's reading into it being a non-color, she doesn't believe it was a colorblind law. Obviously, we had racism back in that day, and it was to remedy inequality, but she believes that I guess is giving permission to have racial bias, sort of racial conscious things going forward. And you just got to kind of hear it. And the lefties are now calling it originalism, progressivism, or something like that. So yeah, they're trying to adopt that and go hard on this. Of course, people on the right are like, what she's saying is ridiculous and dumb and stuff, but we'll break it down. There's some folks who've had some good commentary about it, so we're going to go over that today. Also, Planned Parenthood put out a video about puberty blockers, so I want to go ahead and play that because they, have some misinformation in there, but Planned Parenthood is a huge chain. Obviously, it's an abortion chain. It does other stuff, as the lefties will point out. But they really do inflate their numbers, and I'll go into it more then. But when I get to that segment, however, they really want in the gender business. They're in it. So anything that they're pushing, we have to push back against. I know people feel very, some people feel very neutral about abortion. They're going to continue to push gender identity and getting your kids, and they continuously want more customers because they bring them more cash. They don't want less abortions because that brings them money. They don't want, they don't do a lot of adoptions. They don't do a lot of adoption referrals, not at all in the least bit. And they're people who they back, like Whitmer and whoever, Elizabeth Warren. They don't want pregnancy crisis centers. They're not in the business of people having less abortions. They're in the business of aborting babies. And they're also getting in the gender business, and they give out hormones and they refer puberty blockers, and they definitely want more kids to do that because that is a lifelong customer and they want them coming back. So we have to cut them off at the pass and fight them tooth and nail. To the folks who are like, no, they do mammograms. I'm not even sure if that's true, by the way, because it wasn't true when people were saying it before. I don't know if they started doing mammograms, but it was definitely a lie when they were claiming it back in the day. But again, I'll tell you how they inflate their numbers. Joe Biden also had some comments about abortion and stuff. That was pretty gross the other day that I want to share. And also the FBI undercounted the amount of good guys who save people with guns in areas. So I want to talk about that report. And because we don't know if they did it under bias or incompetence or whatever, but it's important for people to know that guns save lives because they're really trying to take our rights away. It's funny how, listen to Biden talk about something like abortion, and they're attacking these rights these women had for 50 years, attacking their rights. And with guns, it's like, hey, it's not absolute. Your right, your Second Amendment rights, they can be restricted, they can be banned, but they want unlimited abortion. It's just abso-freaking-lutely wild. And they'll say, well, you could kill people. I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious with the stuff that you support? But before we jump into everything, I would encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have on my website, different articles, different videos, on my pinned Twitter account, on my pinned Facebook. I have a video about Prop 3 in Michigan. I ask that you go ahead and you share that. By the way, this week, it was Monday, I went to city council in Detroit, and it wasn't their full city council meeting. It was like health and public service. And I was like, oh, shoot. When they started saying what meeting it was, I'm like, well, it's still health, public safety. So I said my spiel. I did clip it, and I posted it on Twitter, at least. I don't know if it posted on Facebook yet. I did try, and then it failed for some reason. I'm trying again. So maybe by the time I'm off, I'll see it there. And I'll repost if it didn't work out. I'll get it on the air. But please go ahead and share stuff like that. If you like what I do here, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com, blacktnews.com/donate, black like the color, tea like the drink. It costs to stream my show. It costs to run my website. It costs to travel. It costs to use different filters when I do fancier kind of videos. I get loads of compliments when I put out special videos. People call some people called me the other day like, oh my gosh, that video you did was so good. I'm like, yeah, well, some of it's, me learning a bunch of stuff, and some of it is also doing what software and stuff to use. It costs to do all that. So if you would like to help with that overhead, I very much appreciate it, whether it's a gift of $25, $50, $100, $10, whatever you guys can do. I very much appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who likes, who shares, who tags other people, and instructs other people to follow Black Tea News. So thank you all for watching. Someone said our president is not a good Catholic. You can say that again. I love how and love as in like, oh, love kind of irony roll, eye roll kind of thing. When Joe Biden first became president, he got a question from the press poll, and it was from some Catholic network, and they were asking an abortion question, and Jen Psaki tried to like just shove him off like, he's Catholic, don't worry about it. And the narrator, they should worry about it because he's pretty extreme, and at this point, the most extreme probably president that we've had, because he's so open about his position, and Democrats have decided to take such a far left turn on these matters. But again, we're not just talking today about abortion, like in Michigan. Like the whole big thing right now is also sterilization and gender identity. I was talking to a lawyer today, and they're like, man, just if you would have told me all those years ago when people were talking about gay marriage and that being legal, and now we're at the point where like, don't make transition closets in schools. They wouldn't have believed that we would have jumped so far to where we are now. But it's just wild. But evil doesn't sleep. Activists don't sleep. They have they wait. They lie in wait for these opportunities, and they'll go in any sort of open door to radically transform the nation. So again, we have to fight. We have to fight. I want to thank Brighter Michigan PAC. They are someone who's in the fight. If I say something that triggers you, they don't care. I don't care. It does not work like that. But I appreciate them. I appreciate the work that they do in trying to make a difference, especially in my state. And I'm glad to be in the studio. But again, no one cares if you're triggered. It doesn't work like that. I'm just using the space. I have no boss. I am the boss. I am the law. Also check out different merchandise that we have, like Pro-Choice Men Are Sus. I really love that shirt. Rowan Casey aborted, life wins. Also got My Money by Business, got the black tea mugs, and of course, we got the goat hoodies and t-shirts, got those in different colors as well, if you're concerned about it being white, and I understand. And I'll also show one more. I voted for President Trump, and all I got was historic peace deals. There's no new wars on there, gas under $2, and a tax cut, and this lousy t-shirt. By the way, gas, it jumped up again. It's at $4.49 where I'm at. So I know it went up to hurricane. I'm like, okay. But it was like basically at $4. and then it jumped like 4. It was trying to sneak under it, you know. Some places had 379 speckled here and there, and then it was like, no, we're over $4. It's like, okay. And you will see like 409, 419, 429 credit was like the most I saw maybe on Sunday. And now around the corner from my house, we're at 449. And I need to get some gas when I leave here. So that's a bummer. It's a bummer. It just keeps going up, guys. It keeps going up. So I want to go ahead and jump into it. I do not have a funny meme for you all today. So I'm going to go ahead and just jump into the Ketanji story. I'll play the audio, and then I want to go through this piece that was written by, I think, Heritage, if I'm not mistaken. I got to find the article. But we'll go ahead and play that first and go from there.
I don't think we can assume that just because race is taken into account, that necessarily creates an equal protection problem, because I understood that we looked at the history and traditions of the Constitution, at what the framers and the founders thought about. And when I drilled down to that level of analysis, it became clear to me that the framers themselves adopted the Equal Protection Clause, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment in a race-conscious way, that they were, in fact, trying to ensure that people who had been discriminated against, the freedmen, during the Reconstruction period, were actually brought equal to everyone else in the society. So I looked at the report that was submitted by the Joint Committee on Reconstruction, which drafted the 14th Amendment, and that report says that the entire point of the amendment was to secure rights of the freed former slaves. The legislator who introduced that amendment said that, quote, unless the Constitution should restrain them, those states will all, I fear, keep up this discrimination and crush to death the hated freedmen. That's not a race-neutral or race-blind idea in terms of the remedy. And even more than that, I don't think that the historical record establishes that the founders believed that race neutrality or race blindness was required, right? They drafted the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which specifically stated that citizens would have the same civil rights as enjoyed by white citizens. That's the point of that act, to make sure that the other citizens, the black citizens, would have the same as the white citizens. So they recognized that there was unequal treatment, that people based on their race were being treated unequally. And importantly, when there was a concern that the Civil Rights Act.
So that's what I got of that clip. That's all I got for you. Well, there's obviously she talks more, but that's what I wanted to talk about. So she's not wrong that people were aware that there was unequal treatment as far as people in the nation. That's a no-brainer. That's a no-brainer. It happens today. I'm pretty sure that she would actually be for the mistreatment of other people based on their race, because she would feel that it's equity versus equality, and she'd probably pick the equity. When she was being not going through her confirmation hearing, and Ted Cruz was talking about CRT, and she was playing dumb, and I'm like, why wouldn't she know? She's obviously been to law school, and she was associated with this stuff. She was just really playing dumb about it. Now you hear her touting this race conscious, non-color blindness stuff actually in the Supreme Court, bringing that there, and that's why she's there. That's why she's there. There's an agenda beyond her. You know, she's not just a diversity hire in the sense that Biden wanted someone black on the court. She's there because she is a radical. Okay, so she got the job for very specific reasons, not just because she's black. Biden wasn't going to pick someone who wasn't black, but she's there because she's a radical and what she stands for and what she believes in. But the remedy was obviously a neutralness of the law, because they wanted everyone to be treated equal. They didn't say, well, we're going to treat the white people less than the black people. That's not what happened. So they're trying to call this progressive originalism or something. And it's just a really, 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 really dangerous road to go down. But again, she's there for this particular reason. So it was the National Review. I'm gonna read their article, KBJ's jumbled musings of the 14th Amendment in today's oral argument in Merrill versus Milligan. The Justice Jackson capped her very long questioning of Alabama Solicitor General Edmund LaCour with a speech/question, and it was a bit of a speech that went on for around 4 minutes, that runs a full 3 pages. In the transcript, in her speech, Jackson states that the framers of the 14th Amendment adopted it in a race-conscious way, and they were trying to ensure that people who had been discriminated against in the freedmen during the Reconstruction period were actually brought equal to everyone else in society. As she puts it, the Civil Rights Act of 1866 specifically stated that citizens would have the same civil rights as enjoyed by white citizens, and the 14th Amendment was designed to ensure that the act had a solid constitutional foundation. Somehow Jackson leaps from these propositions to the assertion that the 14th Amendment doesn't embody a race-neutral or race-blind idea in terms of the remedy for discrimination against freed slaves. I don't understand her leap. I don't either. By her own account, the very purpose of the Civil Rights Act of 1866 was to make sure that the other citizens, the black citizens, would have the same civil rights as the white citizens. It was designed to remedy a situation in which people based on their race were being treated unequally by the states, and the 14th Amendment had the same goal. The proposition of the 14th Amendment requires that the government be colorblind is open to challenge, but both as to what exactly that means and whether that meaning is well-founded. But Jackson seems to think that the colorblind position is somehow at odds with the fact that the 14th Amendment was designed to ensure equal treatment, when that, of course, is exactly what advocates of the colorblind position maintain the 14th Amendment requires. Jackson seems to confuse herself with her own terms. Yes, of course, the framers can be said to have adopted the 14th Amendment in a race-conscious way. And again, I think you can say that, that's probably fair. If that means that the central purpose of the 14th Amendment was to ensure that freed slaves receive equal treatment in fundamental ways. By its plain text, the 14th Amendment ensures that states shall not abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens irrespective of their race, shall not deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, irrespective of the person's race, and shall not deny any person the equal protection of the laws, irrespective of the person's race. So, this is a little nutty. Now, I believe, for example, you guys know I'm super pro-life, that the unborn should be protected under the 14th Amendment. They shouldn't be deprived of life, of course, without some kind of due process. And then they have equal protection under the law. Some people confuse. I've seen pro-choicers try to use the 14th Amendment and say, well, you have to be a citizen in the United States. No, there's a citizen portion of it, but the rest of that stuff, life, liberty, that applies to non-citizens. If someone was coming over here and was an illegal immigrant or something, you wouldn't be like, it's hunting season because they don't have a right to life. No, you wouldn't do that. They have rights. They don't have the rights of a U.S. citizen, but they still have rights. You can't just go around and deprive them of their lives or something like that. So those things still apply whether you're a citizen or not. So, but anyway, let's say that, I don't know, people aren't getting the memo, obviously, with the equal protection and the life stuff. And let's say we decided to draft an amendment or something just to let it be known, or tweak it or something and say, hey, this applies to born and unborn. And that would be a conscious decision to solve a problem, but that would be for the purpose of everyone having equal right to life. So the remedy isn't to treat people unfairly. The remedy was to make sure that everyone is living up to that original expectation that we're all created equal, and we, you know, and we're all endowed by our creator with certain inalienable rights. So for her to, I don't know, twist that, it's she's an activist. What can I say? But CRT, you're supposed to look at everything through this activism lens. So it probably made perfect sense to her. It made perfect sense to everyone who's pushing it and saying slay queen, yeah, she's so smart, blah blah blah. So it makes perfect sense to them because that's how they're seeing the world in their warped view, even though it's obviously wrong. But they have an ideology, they have a doctrine, they have a belief, they have a dogma, and they go along with it. It's amazing how the left will try to pretend like we have such dogma, or like if you're a Christian or something, and they're like, someone was like, your beliefs, blah blah blah, you can't just make people do stuff X, Y, and Z. And we were talking about abortion and stuff earlier. And like, I didn't mention my religion, I didn't mention my beliefs. It's not hard to grasp and with me, but they say that to atheists who are pro-choice, like secular pro-life as a group, and they'll say you're a God, and she's like, I don't believe in God. Like, so but I'm like, your belief, you choose to believe certain things, you choose to believe it's not a life, you choose to believe it has no value, you choose to believe that the mother's bodily autonomy should supersede the baby's bodily autonomy, even if she made it, you know, even if she's totally responsible for it. You're like, nah, those are your beliefs, and millions die every, well, at least in the US it's about 1 million every year, but my belief is so dangerous, and I'm not even going off a belief on that. It's a human and it's alive, so I just think it should be protected because, you know, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, all that, equal protection, all that stuff. But they have their beliefs. Let me go on. But how is this elementary recognition of at all odds with the colorblind position? In this great dissent of Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, the first Justice Harlan celebrates that the post-Civil War amendments remove the race line from our governmental systems. In his very next sentence, he states that these amendments had a common purpose, namely to secure a race recently emancipated, a race that through many generations have been held in slavery, all the civil rights that the white race enjoy. Internal quote omitted. He, of course, goes on to characterize the amended Constitution as colorblind. On what conceivable basis are we to think that there is any tension among Harlan's statements? Insofar as Jackson might be arguing that the 14th Amendment allows race-conscious remedies, she doesn't touch on the critical questions of what counts as race-conscious remedy and when such remedy is permissible. Some scholars cite the Freedmen's Bureau Acts as evidence that the Equal Protection Clause does not require color blindness, but as law Professor Michael Rappaport points out, in the originalism and the colorblind Constitution, even apart from the question whether those acts inform the meaning of the 14th Amendment, they gave benefits to freedmen and refugees, most of whom were white, not on the basis of race, but on the basis of the oppression and hardship they were enduring. Further, Justice Scalia and Justice Thomas, leading proponents of colorblindness, agree that states can act to provide benefits to Black or persons of other races and ethnicities when they have been victims of discrimination. The usual suspects are going to gaga over Justice Jackson's remarks, but neither they nor she appear to understand the position they think they are contesting. So that was written by Ed Whelan. So yeah, I'm super not surprised by her answer, the route that she's going. That's, again, this is why she's here. It's this sort of thinking like that we need racial bias, equity sort of solutions, that color blindness is bad. It's CRT, and she was playing dumb when like Ted Cruz was trying to grill her about it, but it was obvious that she's linked to it and understands it and knows it, etc. But it's also in the Democrat Party platform. Like, it's already ingrained, it's incorporated, whether people can cite quotes and understand all the tenets precisely with CRT, it's already being lived through their party. So not surprised to see it. That's why she's there. I don't appreciate it. I wish we could clone Clarence Thomas and just have him there forever. To the Republicans like Romney and Collins and Murkowski, I think it was, who voted for her. Can't remember if there was more. Shame on them. There's some cases coming up. Well, she already said she would recuse herself in affirmative action case, because especially I think with Harvard, she went there. But I guess we know where that would go, where she would lean with that case. So again, not surprised in the least bit about Ketanji. All right, another interesting article. This is reported by Fox News. FBI undercounts number of times armed citizens have thwarted active shooting incidents, according to a report. So a new report from the Crime Prevention Research CPRC argues that the FBI's data contains massive errors when tracking active shooting incidents, undercounting how often armed citizens have thwarted active shooting situations over the last 8 years. Although collecting such data is fraught with challenges, some see a pattern of distortion in the FBI's numbers because the errors almost exclusively go one way, minimizing the life-saving actions of armed citizens. The report, which was provided by to Fox News Digital this week by Crime Prevention Research Center founder and president John Lott, states. Data released by the nonprofit shows that 34.4% of active shootings were thwarted by armed citizens between 2014 and 2021. However, FBI data show only 4.4% of active shooters were thwarted by armed citizens during that time period. That is a huge discrepancy. That is huge. All in 360 active shooter incidents were identified by CPRC between 2014 and 2021, with 124 stopped by armed citizens. The FBI identified 252 active shooter incidents during the same period, with only 11 thwarted by armed citizens. Whether deliberately through bias or just incompetence, the FBI database of active shooters cannot be trusted. Gary Mauser, and a professor at Simon Fraser University in Canada, argues in the report. The FBI defines an active shooter as one or more individuals actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. The definition does not include crimes related to criminal activities such as robberies or gang wars. The report points to two variables that have caused the discrepancies between the FBI data and the group's research: misclassified shootings and overlooked incidents. The research argues that FBI misclassified at least 5 cases, including 2 where citizens with valid firearm licenses thwarted a shooting, but the citizens were not listed in the report because the police ultimately apprehended the suspects. The other 3 misidentified cases include one where the FBI simply failed to mention citizen engagement at all, and 2 others that categorize armed civilians as armed security members. The discrepancies also are reflected in the FBI apparent oversight in not including 25 cases that likely would have been mass shootings and thwarted by armed citizens, according to the report. That is in addition to another 83 active shooting incidents that were not detailed in the FBI data. Multiple instances, armed individuals thwarted potential mass shootings and have played out this year, most notably in Indiana, where legally an armed 22-year-old Elijah Dickens, I remember the case, I'm sorry about the name, engaged an active shooter at a mall and was lauded for preventing more deaths. His actions were nothing short of heroic, Greenland Police Chief James Ison said in July of Dickens. He engaged the gunman from quite a distance with a handgun. He was very proficient in that, very tactically sound as he moved to close in the suspect, and was also motioning for people to exit the building exit behind him. Liberal-leaning media outlets jumped on the story and downplayed it, arguing that it is rare for a legal gun owner to stop a mass shooting. It was an incredible shot. It was an incredible shot. Some news stories pointed to the FBI data as evidence such instances are rare. The report notes that CPRC approached the FBI with discrepancies in their reporting in August, but the FBI declined to address them. Aw, are we not surprised? The FBI directed Fox News Digital to page 2 of the agency's 2021 active shooting report when approached for comment on the CPRC report and the discrepancies they found. So there's a bit more in this report, but it's pretty interesting stuff. It's too bad, when you're looking at data and you're researching stuff, a lot of people try to find stats that will fit their narrative, but you have to go deeper to see what people might be leaving out, for sure. A good example, there's a big study that the left cites a lot called the Turnaway Study, and there were all these headlines about tracking these women who have abortions, and they track them over a period of 5 years to see what their lives are like, and they're people who were turned away from abortion, and financially maybe they have it hard or other stuff like that. So they're like, oh, there's had these issues, and these women who've had abortions, they say they don't regret them, which I don't think 5 years is long enough to track to get a good measurement of that, because I've heard from women who've like 10, 20 years it'll hit them, and they'll start processing it and be like, oh, that's why my life has been like this, because I've been carrying this wound all this time. So I think 5 years is too short, but people have complained about the study itself, how they got the data and how many people dropped out, and et cetera, just the different biases and stuff that would have worked in it. But one thing that they don't really talk about, that didn't make all the headlines, that wasn't really publicized, and Secular Pro-Life pointed this out because they bought the book, and they're like, they can't find any headlines about it, and there's only I think one published medical journal thing about this, but 96% of women who are turned away from abortion don't regret not killing their child. So that's just an example. They took what they wanted out of there, but there's this really big important thing, which, by the way, I think that, again, there's a lot of things that are not great about the study to question the data, but let's go with it for a moment and just say that if it's correct, and you're saying 96% of women who are turned away from abortion don't regret not having abortion, and maybe they aren't as well off financially as other people who did abort their baby, but that is the more moral thing to not have killed a person. So ultimately, if people can be good with their decision to not have an abortion, isn't it? And we're talking almost 100%. 96 that's very high. It's a very high percentage. So if the number is if 96% of people who are out there having abortions, we're having 1 million a year in the U.S. If we turned away them and we banned it and they couldn't have an abortion, and by 5 years, only 4% of them regret not being able to have an abortion, I think that's well worth the ban. I think that's the moral decision, but they don't. But they want to ignore that. Again, Secular Pro-Life had to actually get the book and looked at it and was like, the headlines aren't talking about this. This isn't in the news. That's a really important stat. It's a really, really important stat. But that dismantles a lot of their argument. So folks ignore what they don't like, even out of reports that they pick and really love. And it's funny when I mentioned that 96% stat, and they're like, well, go look at the Turnaway Study. I'm like, that's from the Turnaway Study. I'm like, that's from the Turnaway Study. Okay. So since we're on the topic, I want to go ahead and play this video from Joe Biden, as he's been working with his administration to try to save abortion rights and all that other stuff. He said something the other day that I thought was kind of gross.
I share your grave concerns about maintaining access to contraception and reproductive health services on our college campuses, and ensuring there's accurate, reliable information for students and for educators. Students need access to healthcare to thrive in school and in life, and that includes reproductive healthcare. Thank you also to Vice President Harris. In August, we met with college leaders grappling with new, sweeping restrictions to their states. Our work together is ongoing. It's clear. The Dobbs ruling has sown fear and confusion on our college campuses. I worry about the children.
So they're so gung-ho about the college campuses and young women and all that stuff. And what really bothers me right here is how they're talking about how the students need the access to it in order to like thrive in school and in life. And that's the education secretary. So you're talking about adults. They are young adults, but they are adults. It's fun. It's funny how people have conversations about people are too young to have kids or start families and stuff. I'm like, okay, do you believe in like abstinence only education? And they're like, no. I'm like, do you believe that people shouldn't be having sex as young people or as minors and not, 15, 16, 17? They have consensual sex. And they're okay with people doing that. They're okay with doing it themselves at that age. A lot of people will be or whatever. So you're trying to have your cake and eat it too. Procreation has a pretty it's a, I understand people do it to enjoy themselves, but there's biological reasons. There's a whole like design, if you want to say evolutionary process about reproduction and how babies are made, and it's definitely sex. It's definitely sex. So young adults can make better choices, and there's data that when there are restrictions in place or bans in place or whatever, people will generally tend to make better decisions for themselves. They'll make smarter decisions about their contraception. They'll make smarter decisions about who they choose to sleep with, when they choose to sleep with, etc. Maybe people will still make oopsies, but it'll go down. The solution isn't that people go out and then you're just like, yep, you can come here and take care of that if you need to. And to say that to thrive, like there's, it's, I don't know. I just don't to think your bachelor's degree and your lesbian dance theory stuff is worth someone else's life. And I think it's very infantilizing to tell young adults that this is something that they need, young women, that it's something that they need. But Joe Biden is such a bad president. You're such a bad president if you're telling their citizens, if you're telling the citizens or that you preside over, that this is what they need to thrive, to do better, to destroy the next generation, to sacrifice them. How is it any different from human sacrifice for like crops and rain? Like ethically, like I understand like the logistics and the baby outside the womb, etc. But come on, if that's your push, something is wrong. Something's wrong with the country, something's wrong with the people, and something is wrong with you. And again, these people aren't interested in there being less abortions. Maybe they were before, but there's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of money involved. And speaking of a lot of money involved, let's move on. This video from Planned Parenthood, and they released this, and it's about puberty blockers. And I told you guys that they are in this business, and they're going to fight for more gender confusion. I'm sure they're well aware of the fact that it's a social contagion, and I think that's a feature, not a bug. I think it's a feature, not a bug. And they're going to keep trying to make sure that their money is rolling. So here is PP's video.
Size-fits-all puberty experience. If you're trans, intersex, or non-binary, know that you're not the only one feeling confused. For some intersex people, puberty may start later than age 14. You might experience some of puberty's changes and not others, and your body may or may not go through puberty on its own. There are medicines you can take to help your body start the process, like hormone replacement therapy. Some people decide on hormones or surgeries to help their bodies match up to their gender identity, or how they feel inside about themselves. Your gender identity is real. You should be the one to decide what changes you want to make to your body. If you're transgender or non-binary, you may find that your puberty experiences don't line up with your gender identity, or have.
So I just want to again highlight that they're saying it's your body. They're targeting this. It's puberty blockers they're talking about, so they're obviously talking to kids. And kids as young as I think 12, but I know for a fact 13 will be taking this stuff. So they have an audience they're trying to reach, and they're saying it's your gender identity is real. You should be able to decide what's happening with your body. Now, people will say that kids are mature, to give them more credit, they're smarter than what you know. I think kids surprise you, and they are, you know, it's amazing the wisdom of a child, you know, sometimes. But they're also very wrong about a lot of things. Very, very wrong about a lot. And the thing is that they're very malleable and they are vulnerable. And that is precisely what they love about these kids, that they're malleable. So they can inject this sort of identity politics in them, these questions. It's not unusual for people to feel uncomfortable with their bodies, especially as they're going through puberty. And if they're having other sort of issues, you know, you'll have young women going through changes in their body, feeling uncomfortable. And then maybe, like, I don't know, the boys, maybe they feel like they're over-sexualized. Maybe they feel like they're under-sexualized. Maybe they still like tomboy sort of stuff, and they don't know their place in the world. Maybe they have internalized misogyny. Maybe it's deeper than that. I don't know. But then they go on Reddit and they go on TikTok and they go in these other places and they self-diagnose and they get something in their head and then they tell their parents and their parents are like, "What are you talking about?" And their parents push back and it makes them rebellious and then they're digging their heels and then they go to school and then maybe there's an activist there who wants to dig in the heels too and there, God forbid, there's a gender closet or something there, and it just can go on. And Planned Parenthood wants you to know that, hey, they are here for your journey when you need to do all the stuff to your body. Now, from what I can find, I don't think that Planned Parenthood actually gives out the puberty blockers, but they do hormones, and I wouldn't put it past. They do refer puberty blockers to kids. But I think that might be where they want to go next anyway. They are in this business. So they're doing all this empower stuff. You, your body, you, blah, 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 you, knowing they don't think adults at 25 or 24 are mature enough to be on their own insurance. I think you should be able to be on your parents' insurance until you're like 25. Right? They think when you sign a loan at 18, that wasn't mature enough to hold you accountable for the actions that you made. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but you can't argue both and be like, you can't argue that, hey, those kids don't need to be responsible for their actions. These young people who have sex and get pregnant or whatever, they're like, they can't be responsible for their actions. They still have so much life to live. Let them birth their children, but also be like, yeah, this 12-year-old can totally like take a puberty blocker and pause that. And they'll say it's pausing, but you can't just pause your puberty. There's people who take this stuff and they take the hormones and they have micro-sized penises and they don't have feeling in them. And it's ruined their, they can't connect to people, at least sexually. So they're not forming good relationships with people and they want to die. So they're doing irreversible damage, but they don't care because they want a customer that's going to come back and back and back and back over again. And some of the stuff is very expensive. So let's finish watching the video.
How you see yourself. That feeling can be uncomfortable, scary, and stressful. If that sounds like you, know that you're not alone. There are medicines you can take to delay puberty for a while. They're called puberty blockers, and they work like a stop sign by halting the hormones testosterone and estrogen that cause puberty changes like facial hair growth and periods. Puberty blockers are safe and can give you more time to figure out what feels right for you, your body, and your gender identity.
So another thing, man, if you're a young person and you're going through the changes and you have a wicked period or something like that, and you have all this confusion anyway, and someone's like, yeah, it's going to stop your period. That's just like emotional manipulation right there, man. Oh boy.
You don't have to have all of the answers right now. So remember, it's all a work in progress, and it may take time to figure out what feels right to you, but talking to a trusted adult and a nurse or doctor may help. Want to learn more? Go to PlannedParenthood.org/teens.
So yeah, teens, totally coming for your kids, looking at your kids. I saw an interesting video and heard some audio from Thomas Sowell talking about sex education and how the government got involved and how they did all this like family planning. And he talked about how these clinics or whatever are supposed to do this family planning. So the more the government got involved with the sex education and all the other stuff and the family planning and working with those groups and stuff, how the customer base changed. Like before it was like adults, you know, and mothers or whatever planning their lives and whatnot, but we started encompassing more people, like teenagers and high schoolers, and so now they've got teens and preteens who are interested in this stuff and taking this stuff, saying that they can pause puberty, and it just doesn't work like that. And there's people who've had irreparable damage done to their body, but again, what do they care? They're going to make cash money. They're going to make cash money. So they will market to the kids. There's people who have their stuff on TikTok. Doctors who have TikTok accounts, who, chop off breasts and other stuff, appealing to these really confused kids. And it's a very young app, TikTok. And there's a lot of confused people who are just broken, emotionally broken by the world, by their parents, by their friends, and they are so vulnerable. They're so vulnerable, and they clutch on so hard, especially to like the gender identity stuff. Because I don't know, maybe that's the way that they feel some kind of control in a world that seems so out of control for them. But one thing they cannot actually control is their gender. It's intertwined with biology. That's why they're trying to make the change when they should be trying to learn to cope and live and deal with the reality of who they are, who they were born as, and who the determination that was made at their conception. So a huge problem, at least in Michigan, and I know people watch this from all over, but Prop 3, the reproductive freedom, which Planned Parenthood mentioned reproductive freedom in the video. It doesn't just include abortions, it includes sterilization, and there's nothing in there about parental rights. Now, people can say, well, there's no doctor would do this, no doctor would do that. I was talking to a lawyer today, and they're like, doctors do all kinds of stuff. Doctors do all kinds of stuff. Do I think there's doctors with good sense who would be like, nah, I'm not doing X, Y, and Z? Yeah. And for example, women get really upset when doctors won't do like hysterectomies and tie tubes and all the other kind of stuff. But some of them don't want there to be some kind of physical liability stuff later if something goes wrong. But they also don't want to do a permanent damage to the woman who might one day want a child. Because I know people, they're more likely to do it later in life, especially if you had a couple kids or had a kid or two. And that's because they think you might actually be done. But never having a child, they're like, you might want one day. And women might be like, I know what I want. And it's fine, but the doctor's not your slave. And he can make a determination on what feels right for him. So that's someone who's, maybe you disagree with them, but they're trying to do what's best for you. On the flip side, there are doctors that are trying to do what's best for their bottom line. And it might make you feel good at first to hear what you want to hear, get done what you want to get done, but that doesn't mean that they're doing what's in the best interest of your health. They might convince themselves of that. I did a post the other day about someone, I don't know, tried to accuse me of not having empathy. And it's just like, the way that people react to me and the sort of things that they say and the comments that they leave, I'm like, was that displaying empathy? When, for example, people compare a fetus to a cancer, which has happened way too many times than I care to count. And I gave some other examples. I'm like, that didn't seem much like empathy, but maybe it was empathy. Maybe it was empathy. And the people feel things so strongly that they're blinded by their feelings. And then they lash out. And not only do they lash out, they give themselves permission to lash out because they feel so virtuous and so right in what they're doing. Feelings can be a very dangerous thing. That's one of the reasons why transgenderism is such a contagion, especially among young women, because they empathize with each other. They share each other's pain. That's what women do. So you got to have more than feelings. You got to have more than empathy on your side. You've got to really think things through. And I don't think, especially in regards to like in Michigan and Prop 3, I don't think that the parental consent thing is a big thing. It's something that I'm mentioning to a lot of people, obviously, but I don't believe that minors should have the right to sterilize themselves, period. I don't believe that. And when you're like, well, it's just puberty blockers, all that stuff is different. They consider it sterilization rights. The sex surgeries and all that stuff, they consider it sterilization rights. You can go on non-binary wiki or something and read about it right now. That's what they consider. And I'm sure, because what they could have done was just repeal the 1931 ban, which a judge said they wouldn't uphold anyway. They could have just repealed it. That's not what they did. They went way, way too far with what they allow with abortion. It makes infanticide very hard to investigate. But what they made sure to include sterilization, and they also made sure to protect the people who help them obtain this stuff. So if an activist wants to take your child somewhere, the state can't penalize, they can't prosecute, they can't seek adverse reaction. You're just helpless as a parent at the mercy of these wackadoodles. So just be aware that Planned Parenthood, they're in the business of this and they don't want to go out of business and they want more customers. They want more customers. Some people got mad at me because I did a video was talking about Baymax and how they had like a transgender person on Baymax. And Baymax is a cartoon. It's a Pixar film. And they did a spinoff series with Baymax. He's a healthcare robot. And so there was an episode with periods or whatever and pads. He's in a store buying pads. And so people gave their recommendations. And one of them was a woman, I suppose, who was masculine presenting after, I don't know, hormones or whatever. You wouldn't be able to really tell it was a woman. Besides, they obviously put her in a trans shirt to make that case. And she said, these are the ones I always use. So they wanted people to know. And so people try to claim it wasn't a big deal. And I'm like, if it's not a big deal, then take it out. And they're like, we need representation. I'm like, okay, you're gaslighting me. You think it's important. I know you think it's important. And when people question you, you're like, oh, it's not a big deal. No, you think it's a big deal. And I think it's a big deal. And I think it's a big deal because that person will never be a man, regardless. And you're trying to sell us on the lie and trying to sell the kids on the lie, but that's not the only thing they're trying to do. Because they'll say, well, representation is so important. It's very, very important. We need to have this stuff in there. I'm like, I know why they want representation in it. And it's because they want to normalize it. And I said, some things don't need to be normalized. Some things you need to gatekeep. Gender dysphoria is real. I wouldn't wish being that uncomfortable in my body on anyone. Like, I mean, I'm a big girl. I grew up, had puberty, all that other stuff. I know what it's like to be uncomfortable in my body. But to that degree, I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Especially people who don't solve it and just learn to cope through life with it. Like people I've talked to who've, they decide to live their lives as lesbians or whatever, but they still suffer with that dysphoria. That's rough. I wouldn't wish on anyone, but there is an element of social contagion where people self-diagnosing and not getting to the root of why they don't want to be a woman or they don't want to be a man, but they've decided and they're just affirmed and they go ahead and do the damage to themselves. I don't want that to happen. I don't want there to be further contagion. It's not something that people should try to represent and have a big following, a big group. And it's something that people need to gatekeep. Like if you're in that community, that's, it is what it is. But please make sure that you are you really, 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 you're really, really sure about this. And people are challenging you, not just affirming, because it's not something that you want to live with. And it's not something that you want to do irreparable damage to your body. There's if you would leave most people alone when they have questions and they feel uncomfortable, etc., they grow out of it. They'll grow out of it. Maybe they'll be gay, maybe they'll be lesbians, maybe they'll be bi, whatever. Maybe they'll just be straight and they just had they were just a tomboy for a moment. And, there was one woman who said she used to talk about chopping off her breasts and she was such a tomboy. She hated girly things, etc. And years later, she realized she just idolized her brother. And she said, I'm so glad to have grown up when I did and not in today's time, because people would have been trying to convince her that she was trans. So some things you need to gatekeep, but Planned Parenthood has no, absolutely no agenda to keep this a small thing. It is a small population, obviously, but it's big bucks, but it's growing because there is a contagion element to it. And I also think that it opens up the door for creating a class of folks that they will have in their victimhood corner, and it will brush up against other rights of other people, particularly conservatives and Christians, etc. And they'll try to test the limits on that. Like one thing that's bonkers is that the Biden administration decided to change the requirements of like Title IX. So if you have a school that gets funding for free lunch programs or something, if your school discriminates, you could lose that funding. And so if you have a boy who says he's a girl and wants to go on the girls' sports, that's discrimination. Or if they want to go in their locker room and you won't let them go, that's discrimination. And your school could lose like the lunches for low-income kids. I had free lunch from the time I went in school to the time I left it. Low-income community, a lot of people had free lunch, when I was going to school in Webster Elementary in Washington. And then when I moved out to a rural area and I had free lunch, I didn't even understand at the time. And I'm in like in 7th grade. I didn't even understand why I qualified. And someone was like, "Oh, that means your family's low income. Like, how much do you make?" And I was just like, I was really embarrassing in the moment. It was like in the middle of class too. But yeah, I was a free lunch kid. So why make this something that you're going to punish these kids if you don't make everyone else uncomfortable with this gender identity? So that they're really, really pushing. But how many schools would risk not having that funding, especially if they needed to feed those kids? So it is really becoming a protected class and a new bully pulpit. So there's a political agenda behind it all too. But they want to chop up the kids for cash. They really do. I wish it wasn't the case. I really wish it wasn't the case. Unfortunately, we live in a sick, sad world. Anyway, that is a show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed. Please go to blacktnews.com. Check out different content on the website. Check out different videos that I have. Please share like the one for Prop 3. I'll have some more stuff out soon. Please, if you like what I do here, consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. It costs to stream. It costs to run my website. It costs to travel. There's costs associated with all that I do, just like I know there's cost in your life. But if you can, I know some people don't have disposable income, so some people want to give regardless. But if you can give and you like what I do, please consider leaving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. And if you also like different merch, you guys can check out different merch that we have at the store. Got a lot of great stuff that you guys can get. It's still pumpkin spice season, so go ahead and check out that stuff as well. For those of you who do not know, I write books, and I will be at Motor City Comic Con. That's actually next weekend. So on Thursday, Friday, I haven't decided if I'm going to pre-record my shows or if I'm just going to take the weekend off. I'll let you guys know next week. But yeah, I have a lot of books. Those are all my babies that I have published right now. And so I'll have them all at Motor City Comic Con. So if you're out that way, you guys can come to my booth and check it out and say hi. If not, you guys can just find my stuff on Amazon. If you go to blacktnews.com and you go to the merchandise, there's a banner with my books on it. If you click on it, it'll take you to my book website. Or again, you can just search me on Amazon. I got a lot of people have checked out Super Kid, got it from their kids. It's a story about a kid with overactive imagination. He thinks he has superpowers. He doesn't really. He teams up with Princess Lady Diva, who goes along with it because she has a huge crush on him. And then they train Lee. He becomes Stick Man because he thinks it's all real. So he's kind of like the Batman of their team, even though like none of them actually have superpowers. But they just go around the community doing good. And so it's not a political book by any means, but it's got a lot of like really good values that you guys would want to teach your kids in the book. And if you read it to them, I'm sure that you will laugh because it's a very funny book. You might laugh more than the kids actually. So you can check that out. Also got books for older readers, vampires and other kind of stuff. I got a historical fiction fantasy that I adore. You guys can check out. Also got Slay Your Fear, How to Overcome a Spirit of Fear. That's my only nonfiction book out right now. I got another one that'll be coming out soon, and I'll let you know when that drops. But God bless you guys, and I will see you tomorrow.